Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Girls for Greatness podcast. If this is your first time listening in, welcome. It is truly such an honor to have you all listening in today. I am your host, by the way, Delia Perry, and this is episode 152 with Michele Kambolis. Michele happens to be an acclaimed author and speaker who has been featured on Good Morning America, Huff Post Live, Goop, and Raw Beauty Talks. She holds a PhD in mind-body medicine, and she has also been a clinical counselor for more than 20 years. Michele is also the author of Generation Stressed, Play-Based Tools to Help Your Child Overcome Anxiety, which was wildly praised by readers and critics. And her latest book, When Women Rise, is a timely, transformative, and inspiring guide for women who want to bring more joy, power, and peace into their lives. Michele, welcome to the Girls for Greatness podcast. It's so wonderful to have you here.
Well, it's wonderful to be on. Thank you for asking me. And I'm looking forward to this discussion. We talked a little bit ahead of time, and so
Yeah.
it's with great joy that I'm here with you now.
Thank you so much. I know you're doing such important work, and I can't wait for you to talk a little bit about your own journey and your own story. But just to give you guys listening in a clue as to how we were connected, I know some of you who are regular listeners may have heard my episodes with Lindsay Seeley, and she is the author of Rooted, Resilient, and Ready and Growing Strong Girls. And she actually has become a good friend of mine, and she connected us, and I'm so grateful for that connection. And so wonderful, Michele, that we're now here and we're talking together. So I love that.
Yes, and I mean, it's kind of magic when women bridge that connection for one another. I think
Yes,
that, we just naturally want to support one another towards our highest well-being, and so that active participation of bringing women together in their highest good is pretty cool.
I think so too. I think so too. So tell us maybe just a little bit about you and where you're currently residing in the world and just a little about you.
Sure. Okay. So I'm usually in Vancouver, but in the last few years, I've made a transition to being part-time in Vancouver and part-time in Montana. And I find that increasingly I'm so drawn to being in nature.
Mm,
And I have a very dedicated meditation practice and have been meditating since I was 16. And when I'm really committed and deep into practice, which means, becoming more connected with self, I also feel really, drawn to like that expanse of life
mm.
of gardening and tending and hiking and being with the trees and the animals and so Montana is a really beautiful place for that.
Love that. Love that. It sounds beautiful too. That's awesome. Tell us a little about how you kind of became a mind body expert. What kind of led you in that direction?
Well, the seed was planted a very long time ago when I was 16 and I was going through a very difficult time. My
Mm,
first boyfriend had recently died in a
mm,
car accident, and I felt very lost. And my refuge was the community library.
mm,
And so I found myself there and I stumbled across a book called The Hermit, and it intrigued me. It had an image of a llama on the
mm,
front, and there was something about this book that really it moved me, and it opened a gateway towards possibility of greater compassion, of greater awareness, of greater mindfulness. And so that led me to a path of Buddhist training. And
mm.
I've had the blessing of being able to train with people like Ram Dass and Jack Kornfield and Tara Brach, Sharon Salzberg, and be part of a community that really supports each other towards embodied practice of all of those values that go, kind of hand in hand with mindfulness practice.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. So you were 16 when you stumbled across that book. I mean, just listening to you say that like makes me think like, wow, that's seems very deep and profound for someone that age to kind of lock into something like that and to explore something like that and have those insights. So obviously, I mean, that's really cool. I mean, it sounds like that was more than just you, but almost something divine that was pointing you in that direction.
I think so. And what it opened was this awareness of a spiritual life that existed within me as opposed to outside of me. And
Mm,
that's what I loved about it so much. And it also, laid a foundation for life practices that really, root us in a sense of steadiness. So, there's something called an eightfold path, which is, practicing right speech, being really mindful of what we're saying,
mm,
recognizing that our words actually have impact, right concentration, right effort, right livelihood. And so, all of these have been guiding forces for me in the most difficult of times. And certainly
mm,
there have been many, and I've faced great trauma,
mm,
terrible trauma in my life. And so mindfulness, meditation, and this particular path that I've chosen has really been comforting on the one hand, but also allowed me to be fully available to everything as it transpires, not only the pleasant aspects to life, but also
mm.
the really difficult experiences.
Sure, sure. So did you go into then counseling after high school? Did you go into that field, or was it something that you went into later after your kind of exploration with what you were talking about?
Well, I love this question. I went into counseling. It was a bit of a journey, but it was really inspired by a relationship that I had with my school counselor.
Mm,
And my childhood was difficult. I had family members that really struggled with mental illness,
mm,
and because of their own pain, there wasn't a great deal of support or a witnessing of what I was going through at the time. And there was a school counselor that made a phenomenal difference in my life. And because of that trauma, it shut down my capacity to learn. So in high school, I really didn't thrive academically, and I didn't see that I had any possibility of going forward to university or any kind of advanced training. But I decided to go to college, and the first semester I was on academic probation, so
oh
confirmation of
gosh.
the I'm not enough.
Yeah.
And then in the second semester, right? Yeah, in the second semester, I moved out of my family home, um, and and created a more stable ecosystem for myself. And in that semester of college, I ended up achieving straight A's. So something happened where my brain went online when I was feeling physically and
Mm,
emotionally safe. That mid prefrontal cortex, that part of the brain that allows you to really learn and remember and process information, went back online. And then it opened up a gateway of possibility. And I thought, okay, now we're really, now we're really into the limitlessness. I want to be a therapist. I want to help others through
wow.
their own suffering, through their pain.
That's amazing. And I love how, I feel like this is so true for so many of my guests that, what we go through, our own stories, our own challenges are then the things so often that point us or, push us into a direction where maybe we're able to empower and help others. And it sounds like that was kind of the case for you, just going through, your own struggles with your own family history, all of that. So that's really remarkable. Yeah.
And there's so many helpers along the way if we really allow ourselves to lean into those
Yeah.
supports, and sometimes they come in unexpected places. So I both felt led into healing and strengthening, and at the same time had so many beautiful support systems, mentors, coaches, therapists that supported me towards that healing. And then, of course, when you receive that level of support, you in turn want to be able to extend that to other benefactors.
Right. That's so
And this is
true.
part of the beautiful oneness of being on this
Yeah.
planet.
Yeah. So tell me how you kind of got into your writing, how that kind of transpired into first, the the generation stress, and then your latest book, When Women Rise. Two obviously totally different books, but I know we can kind of touch on some topics there, but I'm just curious, like, what was the inspiration behind each of those?
That's a great question. With Generation Stressed, I was noticing a trend that,
Mm,
that the number of children walking through my clinic door with
mm,
debilitating stress, the impact of stress, which is anxiety and
mm-hmm,
tummy troubles and sleep disorders and um, irritability and anger outbursts and everything that goes hand in hand with chronic anxiety was catapulting. It was
mm.
skyrocketing.
Wow.
And I wanted to make sure that parents and caregivers were armed with tools and practices in order to support children, to empower them to mitigate the impact of stress.
Mm,
And that's why I wrote Generation
mm.
Stressed
That's awesome.
out of great concern. And I felt that, that needed to be named. And I wanted to
Mm,
share the stories of children and what, they were going through. And that was 8 years ago.
yeah.
And so their stress levels have skyrocketed even further
Yeah.
since that time.
Yeah, for sure. Especially over this last.
So it's still a very, very, yeah, so unfortunately, it's still a very relevant book. And then I thought, why are our children stressed? Well, our children are stressed because we're more stressed.
Yeah.
And we're living in this cultural ecosystem of doing and striving and proving and comparing and competing. And we're mired in the impact of that chronic anxiety, breathing the air of fear. So the change really needs to happen within us.
Mm,
And so that was one of the reasons why I decided to write When Women Rise, to support those who identify as women and those who want to
sure.
understand and support those who identify as women towards um, life practices that will really, really support us towards our highest well being. And when we're strengthened, when we're
Mm,
healed, when we're in our
mm,
gifts and our highest well being, then our children match us
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
naturally.
So true. I'm curious for you, um, like, what's your personal, I guess, journey with that whole idea of stress and competition and, just some of the things you were talking about. Like, I feel, every woman has a certain level, but I'm curious for you if you've, like, how you've managed that in your own life, and maybe even what some of the things that you would say, um, others could do that are kind of finding themselves in the same situations of feeling stress and overwhelm.
Early in life, I had significant anxiety, and that showed up as social anxiety, panic attacks, and really debilitating levels of anxiety. And I can remember at one point, this was a turning point for me. I was driving across Lionsgate Bridge in Vancouver,
Mm,
and I had my very young children with me. My youngest son was an infant at the time, and I had a panic attack that was so severe that my muscles started to seize,
mm,
the muscles in my hands and my face, and I thought I was having a stroke.
mm,
And so I ended up in hospital and they did all the testing. And then their conclusion was that it was a severe panic attack. And I realized at that point that I needed to take it far more
mm.
seriously, that I needed to get treatment and stick to,
Right.
with that treatment. Because not only was it impacting me, but it was impacting the health and safety of my children. And so that took me on a journey. I would been, touching these practices lightly, but not really taking
Hmm.
it as seriously as I needed to.
Sure.
And then I really began to move into a deeper practice of meditation, therapy, CBT, EMDR,
Mm,
worked with a functional medicine doctor, and began to find ways to not only calm my limbic system, but give it a chance to be able to metabolize the trauma that I had held in my body for so many years.
mm. That's amazing. And not easy work. I mean, hard work for sure.
So vulnerable, so vulnerable. And I'm grateful for it because in going into those really painful and vulnerable places, it allows me to really touch in a very real way what my clients are going through, what my students are going through, what my friends are going through.
Yeah.
And so
That's so true.
I think that when we go through something incredibly painful, a mental health crisis, loss, traumatic changes in our life, when we open to it and really allow it to teach us something about ourselves, we come out the other side transformed, a qualitatively different person, a little softer, maybe,
Mm,
a little disarmed,
yeah.
a little more open, less judgmental.
It's so true. What has been your take on just maybe overall causes for stress in the clients that you've worked with, like the triggers or the I guess the things that you've seen? I'm curious, like as a whole, what you think that's wrapped around.
Here's what I see: the culture that we live in is fundamentally unsupportive to our well being, and the toxic overdoing
Mm,
is harming us.
mm,
And everything that we see in the media tells us that we need to be more,
mm,
do more, that somehow we're not enough. And so we strive for perfectionism, or this, idea of what culture tells us that we need to be. And it takes us away from the fundamental truth that we're already perfect and already whole.
mm.
So instead of meeting the moment with appreciation and awe and gratitude, we
Right.
meet the moment with fear.
That's true.
So, and our lifestyles are, they've taken us away from
Hmm.
expansive well-being into, I mean, we wake up and we check our phone and we look at social media. That takes us away from ourselves into the comparing or the messages of fear coming through. on that platform, and then we might put on the news,
Hmm.
and then we're seeing stories of trauma and strife, and then it just kind of unfolds from there.
Yeah, that's so true.
So,
That's that's a great
so
observation.
if we're able to create these um, periods where we're able to just turn it off, even for a little while, and this is often what I hear women tell me, well, how? I'm so busy. My life is so busy. I don't have a minute to breathe. And I hear from women who will take a break by just going into the washroom
Mm,
and taking 5. And if that's what you've got, take that 5. Or maybe for you, it's taking a pause for a few minutes in the car before you walk into the house,
mm,
where you're met with demands and questions and you know more things to tick off on your to-do list. So I'm just such a fan of the sacred pause,
mm.
giving yourself a few minutes to pause, to open to the moment, to
Yes.
return to the breath, and use the breath. So we take 20,000 breaths a day. That's 20,000
Hmm.
invitations to come home to ourselves.
Mm. I
And
think,
that path to your well-being, it's different for everybody.
yes, I agree. I agree. I think in some ways there's a line that, or I shouldn't say a line, but a twofold thing, you could call it an issue, however you want to look at it, that we're a lot of times dealing with as women in terms of like, yes, that, like you said, society and the toxicity there of you're not enough, you're not this, you're not that, or you're not doing this, you're not doing that. So there's always this level or this line that, or this bar that we're trying to reach, or whatever it is, however you want to look at it. And then on the other hand, I think there's a way, or a healthy way, that, of course, you want to look at self-improvement and think, it's good to constantly be striving to be a little bit better, or to improve in a certain area, or to work on these things that we know we see within ourselves that we need to work on. But it's finding that balance, I feel, between that and acknowledging, your goodness and your greatness in the moment, and not waiting for, it to be, oh, I've achieved this or I've done this, and then reaching for something else. I feel like that whole circle, that cycle is a lot to kind of process and take in, but I feel like it's so important to stop and pause and think about some of those things, because you get in this, otherwise you get in this rat race, this hamster wheel of constantly feeling like you're not enough, constantly doing, constantly thinking you have to, wherever you're at is not, you know, where you should be, or where, someone else has told you to be, or however you want to look at it. So, yeah.
There's something really cool that happens when we feel fundamentally safe in our bodies, when we feel rested and safe and restored. We start to get curious
Mm,
and we start to explore. I mean, think about it in nature when, you know, spring and an animal
mm-hmm,
is fed and they're not in danger. What do? They explore, and it's the same for us humans. And so it doesn't require a striving. It
mm-hmm,
just requires an
mm-hmm,
ecosystem of
mm,
safety, of calm, um, where we're nourished. And so that's physically and emotionally nourished. So then, the next steps just kind of unfold naturally because we're in joy and we want to grow and we want to learn and we want to discover something new. So it takes less planning and less goal setting
mm,
fundamentally.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then what we're doing is we're entering into just our natural capacity to grow, which is really very beautiful.
I love that. I love that.
It has a very fundamental different feel, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, it's New Year's,
Yeah.
new year, new me.
Right.
What is the goal going to be? How many times a week am I going to do that? It's not to say that structure isn't important. It is. But, are we creating that structure from fear, or are we creating that structure from joy and self-compassion?
That's a good point. And I think that can only be brought about when we really take the time, like you said, to pause and to go inward and to really get established and grounded in who we are and what's truly important to us, instead of letting someone else or society or whatever tell us that that's what should be important. Um, that's huge.
Yeah. And that download is so strong
Mm-hmm.
because we see that message and hear that message
Right.
so consistently. And
Right.
so it's a radical act to catch yourself in that moment of saying, I'm not thin enough or pretty
Mm.
enough or young enough or whatever it might be. I need that sweater or that facial or,
Yeah.
whatever
Right.
we tell ourselves in order to feel okay. It's a radical act to say, wait a minute, what am I buying into here?
Mm.
And no, in this moment, I am already enough. I don't need those things.
Mm. That's so true.
So,
That's great. That's great insight. Um, I know that, the basis of your book, like I said, was, you're obviously helping women to find more joy, peace, and power in their life, or joy, power, and peace, however that was worded. But I'm curious, and I don't want to give away obviously the whole thing of the book, but I know you mentioned the sacred pause, but are there other things that you could say are just like starting points for anyone listening that's like, oh, those are three really important things that I want to bring more of into my life?
oh, so the book it moves into all of the foundational pieces to supporting our well-being. So it was important to me to write a book that was very holistic, that draws on our natural capacity to self-heal
Mm.
and strengthen and thrive. And so we go into um, practices like meditation, working with our thinking mind so that we're
Mm.
no longer at war with our own mind, ways to support the body, to calm the limbic system so that it can heal. And there's a chapter on sleep, on
Mm.
um, nutrition, nature's
Mm-hmm.
medicine.
Mm-hmm.
There's a chapter on the healing power of ritual,
Mm.
like the ways that our lives uh, change and are well supported through practices and rituals that are honoring. And there's a chapter on self compassion, something that we're sorely lacking.
Mm.
Yeah. And
Awesome.
and so, I mean, I would look at, first of all, the three pillars. What's happening in my sleep life? Am
Mm.
I getting enough rest? Deep enough rest? We have a sleep epidemic,
Mm-hmm.
and it's having a terrible impact on the health of our mind body system. So, we start fundamentally with the body and the basics of sleep, of movement, making
Mm-hmm.
sure that we're getting outside in nature and moving our body every day, and nourishing our body with healthy
Mm.
foods and foods that are supportive to our unique body.
Mm-hmm.
And um, and so, I really invite people to just to do a stress audit, and the starting point with that stress audit is,
Mm.
where could I fine tune there? Um, well, what would it be like to cut back on caffeine and
Mm.
stimulants? How much sugar am I eating in the day? What's the role of alcohol in my life?
Mm-hmm.
And would it serve me best to pull back there?
Yeah.
So I'm not particularly rule-based, but it's really about, gently and kindly asking yourself, does this really serve me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is this helping, or is this moving the needle towards harming?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are great questions. And such, I love how you touch on all three of those areas. Just hearing you talk about it, I know, there's improvements I can definitely make in probably each of those, but I think sleep is, like you said, it's critical. The older I get, the more I've realized how important that is for my ability to function at my best. I mean, to truly be mindful, on point, to make good decisions, to, remain calm, all of those things. Because I can't do that very well when I'm not, you know, not operating on a good sleep schedule. So that's
Honestly, there's so much truth in what you're saying. It's really hard to meet a difficult moment if you're
mm-hmm,
exhausted.
mm-hmm.
It's hard to respond in the ways that we'd like to
Yeah,
respond when we're, haven't had a good night's sleep or have gone for weeks or even months
right.
with sleep deprivation.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. Well, I love all of this. Seriously, Michele, it's awesome. Your work is so important, and I'll of course have everything linked up, you guys, so you can check out her books and find her on social media. But my last three questions, or my last two questions, excuse me. Tell me three words that best describe who you really and truly are.
Oh, that is a juicy question. Um, Loving,
Mm,
present,
mm.
not all the time, but I really fundamentally
Sure,
present.
that's awesome.
Adventurous.
Mm,
Give
love
me a little
those.
adventure, and my
Love
heart
those.
soars.
Love those. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And my last question is, how do you strive to embody greatness in your own life?
Mm. I I strive to embody greatness by meeting the moment as it is
Mm,
in the most loving way possible.
mm,
So when I can be
mm,
awake to what's right in front of me, right here, right now, then I can choose to respond in a wiser way. If I'm in the past or I'm in the future, I've lost that capacity to, really be my best self.
mm. That's beautiful. I love
So
that.
it's really about finding a way towards being right here in the most
Mm,
open
mm,
and awakened way,
mm,
heart wide open.
mm. That's beautiful. That's wonderful. Seriously. Thank you so much, Michele, for being here. I've truly enjoyed this
Thank
and
you.
enjoy how you've just been so enlightening, and I know for those of you listening, and I know you've gotten a lot from this as well. So thank you for taking the time.
My greatest pleasure. Thank you for having me and all that you're
Yes.
doing.